There are moments in a woman's life when everything changes at once, when one careless truth divides her world into before and after. For Elena Ashworth, that moment came on a quiet autumn afternoon, when the light outside her family's modest London townhouse glowed gold and the air smelled of dying leaves. She returned home early from calling on acquaintances, her head aching, her steps soft on the worn carpet as she moved upstairs, hoping not to disturb anyone. She paused outside her father's study, her hand lifted to knock, when a voice inside made her blood run cold. It was Lord Clarence Peaton, her betrothed of 2 years, the man whose ring she wore, the man she believed she loved with the full hope of her 21 years. His tone was careless, almost amused, and it held a cruelty she had never heard from him before. Then the words reached her, clear and sharp, each one cutting deeper than the last. He said the girl herself had never truly been the attraction. Pleasant enough, perhaps, but no great beauty, and now, without a fortune, she was no longer worth the trouble. He laughed as he spoke, as though her ruined future were nothing more than a small joke. Elenina stood frozen in the hallway. She heard her father's voice next, broken with shame as he apologized for the failed investment that had cost them nearly everything. Clarence replied with easy dismissal, saying he was grateful to have escaped tying himself to a woman of no importance or wealth. Elenina could not breathe. Her gray eyes widened, her chest tight, her fingers pressing together until her knuckles ached. That small gesture, learned from years of quiet endurance, would become her armor. She did not knock. She did not cry out. She turned and fled down the back stairs, silent as a ghost, through the kitchen and into the garden. There, beneath her late mother's white camellia tree, she sank onto a cold stone bench. Pale petals lay scattered on the ground like tears. She pressed her hands together until her fingers went numb and made herself a promise in the silence of her shattered heart. She would never again believe that anyone could want her for herself. She would expect nothing and hope for nothing, and so she would never be wounded like this again. When she returned inside an hour later, her face was calm, arranged into the dignified mask her mother had taught her to wear. Clarence was gone. He had left without asking to see her. That final truth settled into her bones like winter. The girl who believed in love had died beneath the camellia tree, and the woman who rose in her place would be colder, wiser, and determined never to hope. 2 years passed quietly. Elena learned to carry her grief with grace, her back straight and her chin level. She lived with her father in a smaller house now, their fortunes reduced, their lives simpler. She refused 2 offers of marriage, one from an older widower seeking convenience, another from a kind but struggling young clergyman. She chose dignity over comfort, honesty over false affection. Clarence married within a month of breaking their engagement, taking a rich and fashionable bride. The knowledge brought Elenina no pleasure, only confirmation that the world was exactly as she had come to believe. On a pale spring morning, Elenina sat in her modest bedroom with a worn book of Shakespeare's sonnets resting in her lap. It had belonged to her mother and still smelled faintly of lavender. She read without seeing the words, her thoughts drifting through the ruins of her expectations. She was 23 now, no longer hopeful, no longer foolish. Her father's footsteps on the stairs broke the quiet. His voice carried a nervous urgency as he called her name. In the parlor, he paced before the cold fireplace, a letter trembling in his hand. His face held a mix of fear and desperate hope as he spoke. He told her a duke intended to call the next day to discuss a matter of mutual benefit. Elena read the letter carefully. The Duke of Thornfield was known by reputation only, wealthy, powerful, widowed, and distant from society since his wife's death. Elenina did not know what such a man could want from them, but she saw the hope in her father's eyes. She folded the letter and answered calmly that they would receive the Duke and hear what he had to say. She told herself again that she expected nothing. The Duke of Thornfield arrived the next afternoon, precisely on time. The sky hung low and gray as his carriage stopped outside. When he entered the parlor, Elenina understood why people spoke of him in hushed tones. He was not handsome in a gentle way. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a presence that filled the room. His dark blue eyes were sharp and observant, and when they settled on her, her breath caught despite herself. He spoke plainly and without wasted words. He required a wife, not for love, but for duty, an heir, a mistress of his household, a companion who would not demand affection he could not give. In return, he offered complete security for her and her father. Debts paid, futures assured. It was a transaction clear and honest. Elenina asked careful questions. He answered each one directly. When she asked if he ever expected to feel affection again, something shifted in him. His hands clenched briefly, and a shadow crossed his face. He told her he could not promise love, only respect, protection, and provision. She asked for one day to consider. He agreed and left as efficiently as he had arrived. That night, Elenina lay awake, staring at the gray sky beyond her window. She thought of Clarence and his pretty lies. She thought of the Duke's blunt honesty. Strange as it was, the truth felt safer than false promises. By morning, her decision was made. When the Duke returned, she accepted his offer. A flicker of surprise crossed his eyes, quickly controlled. He informed her the wedding would take place in 2 weeks at his estate. As he bowed over her hand, his fingers were warm, his touch brief but steady, and the sensation lingered long after he released her. The wedding was quiet, held in a small stone chapel. Elenina spoke her vows with calm resolve, though her heart felt strangely hollow and full at once. When she became Duchess of Thornfield, she felt a door close behind her, final and firm. The journey to Thornfield Manor was silent until the carriage jolted, and Elenina lost her balance. The Duke's hands caught her instantly, steady and gentle. For a moment she was close enough to hear his heart. He pulled away quickly, but not before something stirred in her chest, small and dangerous. Thornfield Manor rose from the land like something ancient and powerful. Its gray stone walls and ivy-covered towers made her feel very small. Inside, the house was quiet and formal. The housekeeper, Mrs. Hartwell, greeted her with respectful reserve. The Duke showed Elenina to her rooms, which were beautiful and thoughtfully arranged, complete with fresh flowers and books placed near the bed. He told her she could dine with him, or alone as she wished. He pointed out the connecting door between their rooms and assured her it would remain locked unless she invited him. Then he left her alone in her new life. Elenina sat on the edge of the bed, her hands pressed together, then slowly relaxed them. She whispered to herself that she could do this. She could make a life here. Yet uncertainty lingered, heavy as the gray sky outside. The next morning, she accompanied the Duke as he visited his tenants. She expected formality. Instead, she watched him greet people by name, kneel beside a sick child, and speak with warmth and patience. She saw tenderness in him she had not believed possible. Something shifted inside her, something she tried quickly to deny. That evening, she wandered the grounds and discovered an abandoned greenhouse, overgrown and forgotten. As she explored it, Mrs. Hartwell appeared and spoke of the Duke's first wife, Lady Sophia, and the love they had shared. She told Elenina of the loss that had broken him and built the walls around his heart. That night, unable to sleep, Elenina wandered the halls and saw the Duke standing alone before his late wife's portrait, his grief bare and devastating. She retreated without a sound, her heart aching with new understanding. For the first time since her heartbreak beneath the camellia tree, Elenina felt something soften inside her. Not hope, she told herself. Never hope. Yet as thunder rolled faintly in the distance, she wondered if the promise she had made to herself was beginning, ever so slightly, to crack. Life at Thornfield settled into a quiet rhythm that both comforted and unsettled Elenina. Mornings were spent in the library, where tall shelves and deep chairs made her feel sheltered from the vastness of the house. Afternoons were for walks across the grounds, where ancient trees cast long shadows and the lake reflected the changing sky. Evenings were marked by formal dinners with the Duke, where they sat across a long table and spoke politely of the estate, the weather, and nothing that truly mattered. Yet beneath that calm surface, something was changing. Elenina found herself listening for the sound of his footsteps in the corridor, recognizing the steady pace without needing to look up. She noticed how his dark blue eyes lingered on her when he thought she was not watching. She became aware of the way he positioned himself slightly closer to her during walks, always between her and the wind. These were small things, almost nothing, yet they gathered weight in her heart. One afternoon, while walking near the lake, a loud honking broke the stillness. A large gray goose charged toward Elelena with surprising fury. She stumbled back, skirts tangled, dignity forgotten. Then she heard it. The Duke was laughing. Not the restrained smile she had seen once or twice, but real laughter, warm and unguarded. The sound stopped her short. He stepped forward and chased the goose away, still smiling as he offered her his hand. His fingers closed around hers, steady and warm, and for a moment, neither of them moved. When he spoke, there was amusement in his voice as he introduced the goose by name, explaining its habit of terrorizing guests. Elelena laughed too, surprised by the sound, and the shared moment lingered between them, long after the goose retreated. Later that week, Elelena wandered into the abandoned greenhouse again. Mrs. Hartwell joined her and spoke more freely this time, telling stories of Lady Sophia, the Duke's first wife. She spoke of laughter, kindness, and a love that had once filled Thornfield with light. She also spoke of the loss that followed, of a childbirth that took both mother and child, leaving the Duke alone with grief too heavy to bear. That night, unable to sleep, Elelena walked the halls and found the Duke standing before a portrait in the gallery. He did not know she was there. His shoulders were bowed, his hand trembling as it rested against the painted frame. The sorrow on his face was raw and unguarded. Elelena retreated silently, her chest tight with a tenderness she had not expected. After that night, her understanding of him deepened. She saw how carefully he watched over his people, how quietly he ensured her comfort, how he remembered small details she mentioned in passing. Books appeared in her favorite chair. Honey was always set beside her tea. A shawl was placed near the door on cooler mornings. Still, she reminded herself of her promise. She must expect nothing. She must not hope. Then the Duke told her they would attend a ball in London. The words struck her like a blow. London meant society. Whispers. Clarence. Her hands pressed together in her lap before she could stop herself. The Duke noticed. His gaze softened, and he told her quietly that she would be magnificent, that society would see what he saw. The night of the ball arrived too soon. Elelena stood before the mirror, dressed in deep blue silk that fit her perfectly. A delicate gold locket rested at her throat, a gift he had given her without explanation. She lifted her chin and steadied her breath, reminding herself that she was no longer the humiliated girl she had once been. The ballroom was brilliant with light and sound. As she entered on the Duke's arm, she felt every gaze turned toward her. Whispers followed, but his hand was firm and warm over hers, anchoring her. Lady Beatrice greeted them with sharp approval, her knowing smile sending a strange comfort through Elelena. Then she saw Clarence. He approached with his wife, his expression shifting as he recognized her. His words were smooth, edged with insult, congratulating her on securing such a match after everything. The old pain flared, sharp and familiar. Before Elelena could speak, the Duke did. His voice was calm and cold, carrying across the space. He said the fortune was his and that he had secured a wife of intelligence and grace. He told Clarence plainly that he had failed to recognize her worth and that he would not make the same mistake. The music swelled, and the Duke led Elelena onto the dance floor. Tears burned her eyes as they moved together, his hand steady at her waist. For the first time in years, she felt protected. Later, in the quiet of the carriage ride home, she thanked him. He told her he meant every word. The way he said her name sent a shiver through her. At Thornfield, they sat by the fire, sharing brandy as thunder rolled outside. He asked her about Clarence, about the pain she carried. Elelena told him everything. The overheard words, the humiliation, the vow she had made beneath her mother's camellia tree. He listened in silence, his jaw tight with anger. When she finished, he told her Clarence had been a fool. He said he was grateful for that foolishness because it had brought her to him. Something cracked inside her then. The walls she had built trembled. In the days that followed, the air between them changed. The distance at the dinner table seemed smaller. Their silences felt full rather than empty. Elenina found herself waiting for him without realizing she was doing so. One night, lying awake, she admitted the truth she had been avoiding. She loved him. The realization terrified her. Love meant hope. Hope meant risk. Yet the truth would not leave her. The next evening, with thunder darkening the sky once more, she walked to his study, her heart pounding, her hands pressed tightly together. He stood by the fire when she entered. When he turned to face her, something unguarded flashed across his expression before he masked it. She told him she needed honesty. She asked if he ever thought of her as more than a practical arrangement. The silence stretched, heavy and unbearable. Then he spoke, his voice rough with feeling. He told her he thought of her constantly, that she had become essential to him, that he was afraid of wanting her so much. Rain lashed the windows as Elenina stepped closer and whispered that she was afraid too. He took her hand and, without a word, led her through the darkened halls toward a place she did not yet know would change everything. He led her through the silent corridors of Thornfield as rain battered the windows and thunder rolled overhead. Elenina followed without question, her hand warm in his, her heart beating so loudly she feared he might hear it. When he pushed open the door and light spilled out, she understood at once where he had brought her. The greenhouse. But it was no longer the neglected, forgotten place she had discovered weeks before. The glass panes were clean and gleaming. Lamps cast a soft golden glow over rows of living green, and everywhere, blooming in breathtaking abundance, were white camellias. Their petals shone like pearls in the lamplight, filling the air with a gentle, familiar scent that stole the breath from her lungs. Elenina pressed her free hand to her mouth as tears spilled down her cheeks. He had remembered. One passing comment about her mother, one quiet confession made without expectation, and he had turned it into this. The Duke turned to face her, his dark blue eyes no longer guarded. They burned with feeling he no longer tried to hide. He told her he had been wrong when he said he could not promise love. He told her he had been afraid. Afraid because he had loved once with everything he had and lost it all. Afraid because she had awakened something in him the moment she stumbled in the carriage and he touched her arm and felt his world shift. He told her she had brought him back to life with her quiet strength, her dignity, her courage. He told her he loved her. Elenina could not speak. She could only press her hands against his chest, feeling his heart hammer beneath her palms, matching her own. She whispered that love was not love, which alters when it alteration finds. The words she had read aloud in the library, words he now understood were meant for him. His control shattered then. He kissed her among the camellias as thunder roared above them. It was not desperate or rushed. It was reverent and deep, a promise made real. And in that moment, Elenina knew with certainty that hope was not foolishness. It was courage. Later, when the storm softened to rain, she lay in his arms, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing slow patterns against her shoulder. She thought of the promise she had made beneath her mother's camellia tree, and understood how wrong she had been. The walls she had built to keep out pain had also kept out joy. Loving him was terrifying, but it was also the truest thing she had ever known. Life after that night unfolded like something long denied at last allowed to bloom. Thornfield changed. The silence lifted. Laughter returned to its halls. The Duke no longer hid his regard for her. He stood beside her openly, proudly, as though daring the world to challenge what they had found together. When they returned to London society, it was not with fear, but with confidence. At the next great ball, Elenina stood at his side wearing the Blackwell sapphires, her gray eyes bright with happiness. Whispers followed them, but this time they carried wonder, not pity. Clarence watched from across the room, diminished and bitter, while his own wife turned her attention elsewhere. Elenina felt nothing for him. He no longer mattered. In the middle of the dance floor, the Duke of Thornfield stopped and kissed his wife before all of society. It was scandalous, it was tender, and it silenced the room. In that moment, Elenina knew she was truly seen, truly valued, truly loved. Years passed. On a bright summer morning, Elenina stood at the nursery window of Thornfield Manor, her infant daughter cradled against her chest. Outside, her husband crossed the lawn with their young son perched proudly on his shoulders, the child's laughter echoing through the air. Elenina pressed her lips to her daughter's soft hair and felt tears gather in her eyes. She thought of the woman she had been years ago, the girl who had overheard cruel words and believed herself unworthy of love, the woman who had promised herself never to hope again. She wished she could reach back through time and tell her that hope was not weakness. It was the bravest choice of all. Henry looked up and saw her at the window. Even from a distance, she saw the way his face softened, the way his eyes warmed when they found her. He lifted their son's small hand and helped him wave. Elenina waved back, her heart full beyond measure. Later that afternoon, when the children slept, Henry found her in the greenhouse. White camellias bloomed all around them, just as they had on the night everything changed. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin in her hair. He told her he had been a fool to believe he could keep his heart from her. She turned in his arms and kissed him softly, telling him they had both learned. Sunlight poured through the glass as they stood together, surrounded by flowers that had once been a symbol of grief and were now a testament to healing. Somewhere outside, the goose still terrorized the gardeners. Inside Thornfield, laughter and love reigned. Elenina Ashworth, who had once believed herself unworthy, now knew the truth. Love had found her not through pretty promises, but through honesty, patience, and courage, and she would never again fear hoping, for hope had led her home.